is doing. We now have with us this morning Mrs. Norton Cook, who is going to speak to the tax implications of pension schemes. Mrs. Norton Cook is currently the Legal Counsel and Compliance Officer at the University of Technology. Prior to this recent appointment, she was the Director of Taxation at the accounting firm of Deloitte & Touche. I don't know if you two work together. She's Secretary of the Council of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Jamaica and Chairman of its Taxation Committee. During her extensive professional career, she has served as a lecturer and examiner in the areas of business law, commercial law, company law at the University of the West Indies, Mona, legal advisor, company secretary at the Caribbean Cement Company Limited, and legal consultant at the National Housing Trust. She's also an attorney at law and lends her expertise outside of her professional duties as a seminar presenter in taxation, ethics, corporate law, including international business companies. She also serves as a lecturer in taxation at the University of the West Indies at the master's level. Mrs. Norton Cook is a certified public accountant and former vice president of the Public Accountancy Board, and she remains a member of this board and sits on various other boards. She has a strong interest in tax education and tax compliance and is a frequent seminar presenter in these areas. And what this basically means is that she lives and breathes taxation. Please join me in welcoming her.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the obituary. I'll invite you to the funeral. My interest in taxation came, I would just tell you, that I actually came first in the world when I did it in law many years ago. Refused to go to Pricewaterhouse because there's no way I could do accounting. And in the end, I end up as an accountant in taxation. So, for my sins. But you need not die because there's stem cell, or they can freeze you and hope that you would wake up. Right? There's only one thing that is constant, and that is taxes. You're paid from your born till after you die. Right? So that's the way it is. This morning, I'm going to give you a little bit of the history of pensions in Jamaica, just to set the stage of where we are coming from, and in particular in relation to IRAs, because IRAs have only come into their own since the amendment to the Income Tax Act in 2008. Because before that, persons who were self-employed or not in a pension scheme were totally disenfranchised as regards tax benefits related to going into any form of pension arrangement. So in general, technologically challenged this area, you know. Okay, go back. I don't know what happened to the first one. Okay. In general, the Jamaican laws tend to follow the old English laws. And in relation to pensions, it was exactly the same thing. No. Why don't you change it for me? You do it. Slide one. Following the UK legislation in the 1940s and 50s, a series of pension laws remained basically the same until the 2004 Pensions Act, which is the hallmark of pensions and the change in Jamaica. The emphasis in the old days was Pensions Act 1947 for civil servants. The emphasis was on civil servants, parochial officers, teachers, right? 1974, the teachers came into a pension scheme. In 1954, the forerunner of the existing provisions of the Income Tax Act, the driver of this whole thing for pension relief was the tax implications. Over time, other statutes emerged. The Pension Civil Service Family Benefits Act 1976, which I believe Mrs. Hennis is still in place, right? And the Civil Service Family Benefit Schemes, which were forced insurance schemes and acts as a supplement to the NIS for civil servants. And it says all persons in pensionable offices must contribute to the scheme. However, the contribution was only 4%. And what happens in the civil service, and they're trying to change now, is that the government, and out of the consolidated fund came all the pension benefits for civil servants. So when it is that a civil servant becomes of the pensionable age, which in the civil service is 60, an absolutely ridiculous situation, particularly when US has moved to age 71 as the age of retirement. And in the developed countries, because people are living longer, the age of retirement is moving upwards. The civil service, on the other hand, as you know, is often a tangent now of relieving people of their jobs, etc. And what they say is they don't want to change because they need to make room for young people to come in. So that is one of the reasons why we need IRAs. The specific legislation was overwhelmingly related to public servants. And from ever since, all superannuation schemes have always been able to benefit from tax relief. Now, as Mrs. Hennis told you, it is the Income Tax Act, sections 44 and 44A. You can go to slide 9 if you can access it for me. Right? 44 and 44A that govern pensions. Now, they set up an entire department in the Income Tax Department, as it then was, until 1999, when it became the Taxpayer Audit and Assessment Department. They set up a pensions division there with about 4 or 5 people, none of which were specifically trained in pensions, but persons who had come up and self-trained themselves. But they did not have the capabilities of monitoring pension schemes in relation to the investments and the type of investments. They were only able to administer the tax-free status. And what is a tax-free status? The tax-free status is that the fund must not benefit anybody else but the beneficiaries of the scheme, the contributors, and or the employer who matches or makes a contribution to that scheme. So we had an income tax department with a pension section that was inadequate. And therefore, by 1974, after the 1986 reform, I don't know if you all know that there's a 1986 reform called the Siaga reform in my books and in tax state, where you got rid of all those deductions, etc. And we came to the threshold. And during that reform, the FSC type monitoring was actually recommended, but it never came to fruition until 2004 Act, and actually in 2006. So we end up now with an approved superannuation fund under the Income Tax Amendment Act 2008. Means a superannuation fund registered under the Pensions, Superannuation Funds and Retirement Schemes Act and approved by the Commissioner Taxpayer Audit under this act. And then they give